This upcoming lesson is going to require using some radicals and simplifying them, as well as factoring trinomials. And since I'm not sure how much you remember, I just want to quickly go over it here. So if you look here, if you have the square root of 8, if you put it in your calculator, you'll get this number right here. So sometimes we don't want the decimal. Sometimes we just want to simplify it. So we still want to have a radical sign in it, but we don't want as big of a number in there. So one way to do it is, and this is my preferred way, is to look for the perfect squares. So you look for the factors, and hopefully one of them is a perfect square. So if I'm trying to do the square root of 8, I'm going to do, I know 8 is 4 times 2, so the square root of 8 is the same thing as square root of 4 times 2. But I know the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 2 would be a decimal, so I just leave it as the square root of 2. The other way to think about it is to factor the number all the way down. So 8 is the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2. So 3 2's, which is the same thing as 2 squared times a 2. And then the square root of 2 squared is just 2. And then you'd leave the square root of 2 there. Like I said, I'm going to work with this way because I kind of like it a little bit better. Alright, so when you're looking down here, so if I'm looking at the square root of 12, so 12 is 4 times 3. And then I know that the square root of 4 is a perfect square, so the square root of 4 is 2. And then the square root of 3, I can't take the square root, so I'm going to leave it as under the square root sign. So what I've done is I've simplified the radical. So I don't have a decimal, but I've made this number as small as possible, so I can't factor any more perfect squares out of it. 20. So 20 is 2 times 10, but that doesn't really help me because the square root of 2 is going to be a decimal and the square root of 10 is going to be a decimal. So I need to think about something else. So 5 and 4 would be good to use here for 20. So 20 I can write as the square root of 5 times, so 5 times 4 are all under the square root. The square root of 5 would still stay under the square root. But the square root of 4, if I just look at the 4, the square root of 4 is 2. So then I get 2 square roots of 5. Okay? If I look down here at 3, again, 10 is 2 times 5, or 10 times 1, but 2 times 5, none of those ones are perfect squares, so this one is actually simplified. I'm done with that one. And then here, the square root of 200, so I know that 100 is a perfect square, so 10 times 10 is going to give me 100. So I can do, so 200 is equal to 2 times 100. The square root of 2 is just still going to stay the square root of 2, but the square root of 100 is 10. So this would simplify to 10 square roots of 2. Hopefully you remember this from your algebra, but again, you're just trying to simplify that radical. You want to make an equivalent expression, but you want to make that number inside the radical as small as you can. Alright, so I want you guys to finish the back of that worksheet. And then here's the other thing here with the factoring. So again, this should be a review for you. So you want to factor those trinomials. Sorry for the poor video quality. Alright, so I've got b squared and then 8b plus 7. So what I want to do here is I want to think about what numbers can I multiply to get positive 7, and then when I add them, I get positive 8. So 1 and 7, if I multiply those numbers, I'd get 1 times 7 is going to give me positive 7, and if I add those numbers, so 1 plus 7, that is going to give me 8. So then when I rewrite this, hopefully you remember this again. So I'm factoring it. I'm kind of like unfoiling. So I'm going to have b plus 1 and b plus 7. And again, you can check that. B times b would give me the b squared. On the outer, I'd have b times 7, so I'd have 7b. The inner, 1 times b, so I'd have 1b. So 7b plus 1b gives you the 8. 1 times 7, the last term, so I get 7. Alright, same thing over here. So you look at this middle term right here, or this last term first. So I want to say, what numbers can I multiply to get 10? But then when I add them together, I'm going to get negative 11. So when I multiply to get 10, add them together, get negative 11. So 2 and 5 would give me 10 when I multiply them. But if I add 2 and 5 together, I'm going to get 7. So that's not going to work. 1 and 10 would give me positive 10. But if I add 1 plus 10, that's going to give me positive 11. So again, that's not working for me. But if I switch it to negative 1 and negative 10, if I add negative 1 plus negative 10, I'm going to get negative 11. So there's the negative 11 I'm looking for. Negative 1 times negative 10 is going to give me positive 10. So over here, I'm going to write n minus 1 times n minus 10. So that's factored now. I'm going to do 2 more with you. So again here, same thing here. So what numbers can I multiply to get negative 90? And then I add them together, and I'm going to get 1. So this right here is a coefficient of 1. So 90 right there, I'm thinking maybe like negative 10 and 9. Negative 10 times 9 would give me negative 90. Negative 10 plus 9, that's going to give me negative 1. So I need to switch my negative signs. So negative 9 and 10. So negative 9 plus 10 is going to give me positive 1. So this now works. So this is my factors here. So I'm going to say m minus 9 and then m plus 10. Alright, over here, I'm going to do the same thing. This is the last one I'm going to do. So 10, so I want to multiply to get negative 12, and then I want to add them together to get 4. So if I think about this here, so obviously 3 and 4 multiply, or negative 3 and 4 would multiply to give me negative 12. But if I add those together, I'm going to get 1. That doesn't give me the 4 that I'm looking for. So let's think about 6 and 2. So 6 and 2 I can multiply to get 12. Now I want to get negative 12, so one of these has to be negative. I want to have positive 4, so if I make that 2 negative, 6 plus a negative 2 is going to give me positive 4. So it must be 6 and negative 2 are the factors I want to use. So I'm going to do n plus 6 times n minus 2. Alright, so again, I want you to continue with this worksheet right here. There's a couple of them I told you to skip, so just go back into Schoology and make sure you skip the ones I told you to skip. I just told you to skip because they're a little bit more complicated, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. If not, go back and replay this video. Have a good day. Have a nice weekend.